1970 was the peak of muscle car power. Automakers pushed limits like never before. Bigger engines, more speed, and record-breaking performance made this the ultimate year for fast cars. But while some became legends, others stayed in the shadows. Just as fast, just as powerful, but rarely talked about. Number 15, 1971. Ford Torino Cobra, 429 SCJ. The 1971 Ford Torino Cobra was fast, really fast. It covered a quarter mile in 14.5 seconds, hitting a speed of 102 miles per hour. But for some reason, it never became a big name in the car world. Maybe it got lost among all the other Torino models Ford made that year. Ford made small changes to its cars in 1971. It dropped the Fairlane and Falcon names and focused on the Torino. There were 14 versions of the Torino. The basic one was called Torino, and it came as a 2-door hardtop, 4-door sedan, and 4-door station wagon. A step up was the Torino 500, which had more styles, including a sports roof version. The fanciest one was the Brougham, designed for comfort. And there was also the Torino Squire, a station wagon with extra details. For speed, there were two choices, Torino GT and Torino Cobra. The GT had a 302 cubic inch engine and a sporty look, but the real fast one was the Cobra. It came with a 351 cubic inch engine, but Ford also offered a 429 cubic inch Cobra jet engine for more power. However, new engine rules meant slightly lower power compared to the year before. One test of a Torino Cobra with a 370 horsepower 429 Cobra jet engine and automatic transmission showed a 1/4 mile time of 15 seconds at 97 miles per hour. Another test, after some tuning, improved that to 14.5 seconds at 102 miles per hour. Ford built 326,163 Torinos in 1971, but only 1,636 GT convertibles and 354 Cobras were made. That might explain why the fast Torino never became a big name. It had great speed, but not enough people noticed. Number 14, 1970 AMC Rebel Machine. The 1970 AMC Rebel Machine was fast, reaching 60 miles per hour in 6.8 seconds and covering a quarter mile in 6.8 seconds, 14.4 seconds at 99 miles per hour. It had serious speed, yet it never became a household name like other muscle cars of its time. American Motors Corporation, known as AMC, was a smaller company competing against big names like Ford, Chevrolet, and Dodge. In 1970, it introduced the Rebel Machine, a car built for performance with a bold look. It had a 390 cubic inch engine producing 340 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque. The car came with a 4-speed manual transmission with a Hurst shifter, and an automatic was available as an option. AMC launched the car in October 1969 at a major drag racing event in Dallas, Texas. The first 1,000 models came in a red, white, and blue paint job, while the rest of the 2,326 units were available in other colors. The car stood out, but it had tough competition from the Pontiac GTO, Dodge Charger, and Ford Mustang Mach 1. Despite its performance-oriented suspension system, power-assisted front brakes, and Hurst shifter, AMC did not sell many. AMC tried again in 1971 with the Matador Machine, but the focus had shifted to fuel economy. The Rebel Machine had everything needed to be a muscle car legend, but it never got the attention it deserved. It was built for speed, but only a few people knew about it. Number 13, 1973. Pontiac Firebird. Formula 4, 5.5 SD. The 1973 Pontiac Firebird, Trans Am SD 455, could reach 60 miles per hour in under 5.5 seconds and complete a quarter mile in 13.8 seconds. It was one of the fastest American cars of its time, yet few people talk about it today. By the early 1970s, muscle cars were in trouble. New emissions rules made engines weaker, and car companies started focusing on fuel economy instead of speed. Many thought the era of fast street cars was over, but Pontiac had other plans. Against all odds, it introduced the SD455, a high-performance version of its 455 cubic inch engine, producing 310 horsepower. Despite its powerful engine, It passed emissions tests like any other car, a rarity for something this fast. In a test on February 7, 1973 in California, the Firebird SD 455 proved itself. It weighed 3,854 pounds, had an automatic transmission, and still managed to beat sports cars like the Chevrolet Corvette 454, Porsche 911, and Jaguar 512. Only a few people remember the Firebird SD 455, but it proved that fast cars weren't finished even as the muscle car era was ending. Pontiac showed that speed was still possible. Number 12, 1970, Buick GSX Stage 1. The 1970 Buick GS 455 Stage 1 was one of the fastest American cars of its time, but almost nobody talks about it. Back then, muscle cars were all about how well you could tune and drive them, and not many people got their hands on the GSX Stage 1. Buick only made 3,776 of these in 1970, with just 479 in the GSX version, which might explain why it didn't get as much attention. The Stage 1 package gave the GS 455 more power with a hotter camshaft, stiffer valve springs, bigger valves, and a tweaked-up carburetor. It also came with a better oil pump, recalibrated ignition timing, and a stronger cooling system. The transmission options included a 3-speed manual, a 4-speed manual with a Hurst shifter, and a 3-speed automatic. In tests, a well-prepared Stage 1 did the quarter mile in 13.38 seconds at 105.5 miles per hour. Even a standard setup with normal tires and gearing ran it in around 13.8 seconds at about 101 miles per hour. Despite being fast, it was easy to drive daily with power steering, comfortable interiors, and options like bucket seats and a tachometer. 1977. Pontiac Can-Am. Most people know the famous muscle cars, like the Ford Mustang, Dodge Charger, and Chevrolet Corvette. But there's one car that people often forget, even though it was surprisingly quick for its time. It came out in 1977 and was called the Pontiac Can-Am. Why don't many people talk about it? Well, Pontiac only made around 1,377 of them. They had planned for 5,000, but a broken spoiler mold stopped production early, making this car rare. The Can-Am was based on the Pontiac Le Mans Sport Coupe, but had a stronger engine. Most of them came with a 400 cubic inch V8 engine, the same one used in the Trans Am. It made 180 horsepower and 325 pound-feet of torque. For California or high-altitude areas, the Can-Am came with an Oldsmobile 403 cubic inch V8 that had a little more power, at 185 horsepower and slightly lower torque. Speed-wise, the Can-Am could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 10 seconds and finish the 1/4 mile in 17 seconds at 84 miles per hour. These numbers don't seem fast today, but for a 1977 mid-size car, that was solid performance. The Can-Am had a turbo-hydromatic 400 automatic transmission and a rear axle gear ratio of 2.41 to 1, which helped with fuel economy but didn't exactly boost acceleration. It also had Pontiac's radial, tuned suspension, which gave it better handling than most other muscle cars of the late 70s. Number 10. 1970. Mercury Cyclone Spoiler. 429 CJ. Most people remember Ford's muscle cars, like the Mustang, Torino, and Fairlane. But Mercury, Ford's sister brand, had its own powerful machines. One of them was the 1970 Mercury Cyclone Spoiler. The Cyclone Spoiler was fast, but never got the fame it deserved. Unlike earlier Mercury cars, which were often just fancy versions of Ford models, the Spoiler had its own unique design. It had a long, curvy body that looked different from Ford's fastbacks. It was based on the Cyclone GT, but the Spoiler was built for speed. The Cyclone Spoiler came with a 429 cubic inch V8 engine that made 370 horsepower, a significant improvement over the Torino Cobra. Mercury also offered a drag pack option, which upgraded the engine to 375 horsepower and provided stronger axles for better traction. The car also had a 4-speed manual transmission with a 3.5 to 1 rear axle ratio, a competition handling package, and wide tires to help it stay stable at high speeds. The car could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.2 seconds and run the quarter mile in 14.1 seconds at 100 miles per hour. Impressive for a car of its size. The Cyclone spoiler was a big car, measuring 29.9 feet long, about 3.7 inches longer than the Torino, and weighing about 100 pounds more. Despite its size, it was fast, stable, and a true muscle car. But with so much competition from Ford, it was easy to overlook. Number 9, 1971. Plymouth GTX 440+6. The 1971 Plymouth GTX 440+6 was one of the few muscle cars that didn't slow down when others started losing power. It was strong, fast, and had a bold new design. But somehow, it never became as famous as some of its rivals. The GTX was the high-end version of the Roadrunner, and in 1971, it got a new body style called fuselage design, making the car curvier and more aggressive. The rear track was 3 inches wider, helping with stability. Under the hood, the GTX came with a standard 440 cubic inch V8 with a 4-barrel carburetor, delivering 370 horsepower. The optional 440, with 3 2-barrel carburetors, made 385 horsepower, and the legendary 426 cubic inch Hemi 5.8 stayed at 425 horsepower. The car could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 5.7 seconds and finish the quarter mile in 13.7 seconds at 102 miles per hour. Despite the GTX's power, it gained 170 pounds compared to previous models, which slightly slowed it down. But it still had features like the air grabber hood to bring in fresh air for the engine and strong axle ratios for better acceleration. Number 8. 1974 AMC Javelin AMX. The 1971 AMC Javelin AMX is a car that many have mixed feelings about. Some think its wide fenders and bold design look strange, while others love how it stands out. But whether people like the way it looks or not, one thing is clear: it had speed. American Motors Corporation wanted to compete with the Ford Mustang, so they made the Javelin and AMX. The Javelin was a 4-seater, while the AMX started as a 2-seater but became a high-performance version of the Javelin. In 1971, the Javelin got a new look with a longer body and a slightly wider frame, making it seem even bigger than before. The standard Javelin had a 6-cylinder engine, but the AMX only came with V8 engines. The strongest was a 401 cubic inch engine making 330 horsepower. The 401 AMX could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 8 seconds and run the quarter mile in 16 seconds. Despite its impressive speed, the Javelin AMX never became as famous as the Mustang or Chevrolet Camaro. But it was still just as exciting for those who knew about it. These cars didn't just pass through history, they created. They might be forgotten by many, but not here on Classic Muscle Legends. Which of these hidden beasts surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay tuned for more legendary muscle cars from the past.